How do we build our dreams when we don't know what we want? Learn how Flaunt solves this problem in 5 bold and glittery steps with radio host Laura Cheadle. Using a combination of best girlfriend discussions and therapy-based exercises, listeners are taught how to build their dreams and live their sparkle. Flaunt. Find your fetish, laugh out loud, accept unconditionally, navigate the negative, and trust in your truth.
Hello, welcome to Flaunt, Build Your Dreams and Live Your Sparkle. I'm Laura Cheadle, and today we are going to talk about a subject that is actually really near and dear to my heart, and that's EFT, which is Emotional Freedom Technique. And I say it's near and dear to my heart because it's something that I have used for myself before, but it's not something that I'm certified in. It's not something that I'm trained in. It's just one of those things that I ooey gooey love all the time. And here, talking about that is Naomi Janzen, and she is a certified expert clinical EFT practitioner and certified energy psychology practitioner who has been tapping since 2008, so a long time. Now, she's a clinical EFT trainer and mentor for both EFT Universe and evidence-based EFT for clinicians, as well as a mentor for EFT Universe's Energy Psychology Certification Program. She's the author of the forthcoming book, Tapping Out of Depression When You Barely Care Enough to Try. And I just love that because how many of us fall into something, whether it's depression or something else, and then barely care enough to pull ourselves out? And she is the co-creator of the tapping and meditation site One Mind Live, and the creator of Remindfulness, named a top 10 mindfulness app by Positive Psychology. Now, this is one of the really things that I think is super cool, too. She's also been a screenwriter for over 25 years before becoming an EFT practitioner. She gained extensive experience in understanding the forces and events that shape personality and uses her storyteller's sensibility to convey the principles of her passions, which are EFT and mindfulness, to her practitioner trainees, clients, and to her worldwide audiences through her blogs, videos, workshops, and movie projects such as The Portal, she's a consulting producer on that, and The Science of Tapping. So with that, oh my goodness, I am excited. Welcome to the show, Naomi.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, I am so excited to learn more about this. Not only EFT, but how did you ever get started in EFT? I mean, coming from a movie producer background and screenwriting and all this stuff, how did you make that jump?
Well, as with most things that, most of the really valuable, wonderful, good things that happen in our lives, it's usually extreme pain and trauma that drives us to them. I made a decision to move to Australia for love about 12, 13 years ago, something like that. And that decision proved to be disastrous. But disaster in that way that 2020 hindsight, it was the biggest blessing of my life, because after struggling for a couple of years to just do everything I could think of to get myself out of depression, and nothing really worked long term. So meditation, mindfulness, reading, journaling, all those things had a little bit of they helped a little bit, and the results might last for, maybe a day, maybe 2 days, 3 days. And then the intense pain would come rushing back. And I had not ever been a depressive person. And I didn't want to go on medication just because I knew of some people in my past, in my life, who had not been able to get off it. And so I thought, I will do that if I have to, but if I can avoid it. And I just didn't think of myself as a depressed person, although I knew I was absolutely 100% depressed, and I had new understanding and new empathy for people suffering from depression. I finally admitted to my best friends that that was where I was at. I just didn't want to be here anymore. And as I often point out, I wasn't suicidal, and I don't know why I wasn't, because I woke up disappointed to be awake every morning. But I was really kind of looking at the next sort of 30, 40 years as just being this sort of dreary slog. And I finally admitted that to my best friends, and one of them said, "You have to try this tapping thing." And so, I mean, as I say in the, you've mentioned the title of my forthcoming book, When You Barely Care Enough to Try. Anyone who's depressed or has been depressed knows that you're exhausted. Depression is exhausting. And so that seemed like the easiest thing to do, just to look at this little free manual that she sent me and give it a try. And so I could tick that box and say, well, I did what I promised to do. And I actually started to feel a shift as soon as I started tapping. And I kept going, and I tapped over a 5-day period. I tapped for about between 45 minutes to an hour and a half at a time, twice a day, with intermittent tapping throughout the day. If I would get triggered driving in my car, I would see a cafe that reminded me of that lost love that I, so tragically had moved to Australia for, and then it imploded. I would just start tapping, like my collarbone point or something. And I'll share what those points are for anybody who's listening and doesn't know, so they can get started if they want. But and I just felt a constant improvement. And over a 5-day period, I actually healed my depression. I mean, it was gone. It was absolutely gone. And then I thought, it's going to come back. It's going to come back. Everything I've done has helped eventually comes back. Well, it never has. And so this is 11 years later. It's never come back. And it was so extraordinary. I started using it on a lot of different things, physical things, because at the time there was no science behind it. So we just kind of all went, is it the placebo effect? I mean, is it distraction? Is it what is it? And I thought, my attitude was, I don't really care that I don't know what it is. All I know is it works. And it seems to work whether you believe in anything or not, whether you quote, believe in it. And the results that I was having with it and tapping with other people made me more interested in that than in being a television writer producer anymore. Mm-hmm. So that's when kind of I started shifting from that career stream into where I am now.
A couple of things that you said that I really like. You mentioned the possible placebo effect, and that at that time there was no research behind it. But when you were telling your story, I picked up on a couple of things. It almost seemed like you almost would have had a reverse placebo effect. You get this manual from a girlfriend, and it almost felt like part of you was saying, well, sure, I'll try it, but it's not going to work. And you tried it, and it did work. And then you had those thoughts, I don't know why, but it did. I bet my depression will come back. I bet it's coming back. It's almost like it worked in spite of the fact that you didn't think it was going to work. And in a way you didn't expect it to work. And maybe you didn't even want it to work.
You make a really good point. A couple of really good points there. First of all, when I would introduce tapping to people after I'd learned it, there were always people that would say, oh, I love this stuff, I'm right on board. But there were always the people that would say, oh, I have to say, this isn't going to work for me. I don't really believe in that stuff. Sorry. And I would just say, interestingly, it doesn't seem to matter. Just, are you willing to look a bit ridiculous for 5 or 10 minutes? And, and if people went, all right, we'll see. And then they were completely freaked out when it worked. So maybe somebody had they'd had a stiff neck for the last 3 weeks ever since they did a business trip. And they think that was the airplane seat was uncomfortable or something. And we tap for 10 minutes and it would suddenly be gone. And they would be kind of looking at me like, what did you just do to me? So that is something that, that it's an important factor, is it doesn't require belief. And there have been studies done to kind of demonstrate that this is a reliable result. Over and over again, it does not matter what you think about it, whether you believe in it or don't believe in it, the results are the same. Mm-hmm. And the other point you made that I think is interesting, when you said that you don't want it to work. One of the things I identified, and it's a chapter in my book called Admit It Feels Good. is something in tapping that we refer to as secondary gains. And secondary gain is the upside to the downside. So what I identified in myself was that part of me didn't want to get rid of the depression, because in my case, the depression and the things that had happened to me felt so unfair that there was a sense of self-comfort in the depression. It's like the sadness was, in a weird way, kind of comforting. And one of the things I tapped on was, even though part of me doesn't want to give up this depression, as you know, in tapping, and then the rest of the statement, I accept myself anyway. So, and that caused a big shift. And so the chapter in my book that deals with secondary gains deals with just that thing. And like with anything else with tapping, there's no special way that you approach a secondary gain. You just tap on it. You just accept that this is how you're feeling and tap on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, for listeners who don't know anything about EFT or the tapping and who might be thinking, what are these two talking about? This sounds really intriguing, but I don't know what you mean. Would you take a quick step back and let our listeners know what it is, just the basic structure of tapping?
Okay, awesome. Yes. We have these places on our skin that Chinese medicine tells us are the exit points of the meridians. If anybody knows about acupuncture, these are the places that acupuncturists put their needles. There is a little tool called a galvanometer or an AccuPen that picks up electrical conductivity on the skin. And when you move this little machine onto these points, it gives a very loud beep to let you know there is higher bioelectrical output on these points in your skin, like 4,000 times higher than the surrounding skin. So you can kind of think of them as electrical outlets on your body. And they're in very specific places. And when you tap on them, you create what's called a piezo or piezoelectric pulse that travels into your body. And this is where the science is now catching up in terms of identifying the physical existence of the meridians. It travels down these meridians. We think that's what's happening. But what we know happens is it creates changes in your brain chemistry, in the activity in your brain, which results in changes in your stress level. The stress hormone cortisol is reduced drastically. We go into kind of a theta brainwave state, which is a waking hypnosis, very calm state. It produces the feel-good chemicals like serotonin and endorphins. So you're kind of telling your internal bartender to start mixing up some good cocktails instead of the bad ones like adrenaline and cortisol and the ones that make us feel bad. And when you couple this with a cognitive statement, when you're consciously thinking about something that is a problem for you, whether it's a physical pain you're having, something upsetting that happened, you counter condition your brain. So you're taking what used to be, say, a thought that made you upset, and you're tapping on these points with your fingertips, and instead of your body producing all these negative feel bad chemicals, because every emotion is a chemical. If anybody didn't know that, every emotion that you have has a chemical signature. And so while you're tapping, you're actually pumping these good chemicals through your body, and your brain goes, wait a second, is this a feel bad thing that happened or a feel good thing that happened? I'm confused now, so I'm just going to drop the emotional response from the memory. It doesn't go, I saw that horrible, scary thing on TV and I'm still freaking out about it. That was a fun thing. It doesn't do that necessarily. It just says, I'm not freaking out anymore. I have the memory and I don't have the response. So that's why it's called emotional freedom techniques, so that you are freed from having this conditioned response. It frees you from emotional things that you may have been suffering with since you were very small. And it can be recent things, childhood things. You can tap on something that comes up for you in the moment that's upsetting and help regulate your system so that you can stay calm and centered and focused, say, while you're having a difficult conversation with somebody, for example, that it usually triggers you. And I mean, I can go into a lot more detail than that, but
yeah, no, that's